started the recording anytime you're ready, Helen. We can start, I think.
Well, welcome everybody to this debate. This is an opportunity for the teams, different sides of the pond, to work together on this really interesting and topical agenda. So we have long-standing collaborations with the American University and with Vaasa University in Finland. And obviously we have colleagues in Italy now that are part of the centre. And we have an ongoing collaboration with WIC in Barcelona. But what we're working on in the research centre is developing centres of excellence. And when we hear from Federica in the final session, we can see just how important it is that we have the critical mass of engagement in a particular topic so that we can then put forward to our international audiences. This is where our expertise is particularly strong, and this is where we're going to make a difference to understanding and policy practice. So I think I've said enough words of welcome. We have three speaker panels. We're going to be joined a bit later by Matthew, but I suggest that we start off with Saverio Romeo. Okay, and you'll speak for 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having me. Welcome everyone. I'll try to share my presentation first of all. See if I can find it. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on, give me a second. If I can move this, I'll go in full screen. Can you still see it? Yes.
Yes,
okay.
Very good.
Okay, thank you for having me here. My contribution will be for this non-academic. I will share with you my experience, my current experience in this domain, particularly regarding the area of smart city or smart territories, also as used in the EU, and not much here in the UK. I'm going to share with you basically the relationship that there is between digital technologies and the concept of sustainability in various projects in which I'm involved. The starting point for all these projects is the following, that I'm sure you know pretty well this picture. These are the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN. There are 17, and they cover all a number of issues. I think it's important to start from here because quite often the term sustainability is exclusively associated to the environment or the climate change. But it becomes quite clear instead when there is digital technologies involved that the scope of this term is much wider. So it's not just about environment, but it's also about rights. It's also about solving inequalities. And therefore, when we go, if I summarize the debates I'm in when I'm around table with digital officer in cities or with technology people developing certain type of solutions for the environment and so on. I mean, these are the three questions are coming towards us. And the first one is to understand what relationship there is between digital technologies and environmental sustainability. And it is a positive one, it is a negative one, it is both. What to do about it, and that what to do about it does not have an easy answer. And then there is all the domain of the ethical implications of digital technologies that are becoming more prominent and widely considered at this stage, particularly because of artificial intelligence. There were ethical implications before, but with the rise of particularly generative AI and all these attentions we are putting towards artificial intelligence, and the fact that artificial intelligence has some serious implications from an ethical point of view, these questions is becoming a common one. And within that, I'm not an ethicist, and therefore I cannot I cannot deconstruct well that term, but within that ethical implications, there is another question, which is the third one in my slides, which is about inequality, basically. And so the question is if the digital technologies are solving or exacerbating societal problems, particularly inequality of any sorts. Now, my experience is primarily about the red one, the red question. I will discuss that. I have a direct experience on that. I'm part of these discussions on projects, and I can share more informed point of view. On the other two, I think it's important to touch it, and I'll give an idea, give what's going on, I'll give what the debates are really about, and then hopefully we can discuss all together in the Q&A or in the discussion session. Now, I'll share 3 examples on which I've worked on. And these 3 examples are examples in which the impact of digital technologies are positive in relation to an environmental problem. The first one is water resource management, this one, in which basically the objective of this project was to optimize the use of water resources in an area with particular dedication to agriculture. This water network was old, with an incredible amount of losses, of water losses. It was very difficult to locate the actual problems on the network, because basically only if someone living near a pipe was looking at a spot, a water loss, then called up the water company, and then the water company after 2-3 days sent someone to fix it. This was the only way of fixing a problem on this water network. Now, the project we were involved was the following. Let's first of all modernize the actual network. This was a 19th century network. I think that the first pipe was laid down in the 1878, if I remember well. There were not really, there have not happened a lot of modernization of this system. So let's modernize the networks first. And while we are doing that, let's basically create a network of sensors all along this network to remotely, real-time, monitor the condition of the pipe. We did that, was implemented, the number of losses is completely reduced. Also, the ability of the companies of managing the water resources is completely different, has brought optimization of the system and saving water. So this can be seen as a positive impact of a convergence of digital technologies towards an environmental problem. Another one was in a city in Spain, and here the city in Spain had the inability of understanding level pollution in the city. The project was similar, technologically speaking, to the previous one. We had a network of sensors this time to monitor the pollution, the air pollution, the noise pollution in the area, in various parts of the cities. That gave a possibility to urban planners at the town hall to understand, for example, how to change traffic dynamics and reduce air pollution in certain area of the town, of the cities. Again, another positive impact, so that technologies that solve or help to solve environmental problems. And you can find many of these all across Europe, everywhere in the world, really. And from very simple one, as I described one, because the one on noise pollution monitoring, air pollution monitoring is, technologically speaking, not that complicated, to problems much more difficult to face, like the forest wildfire prevention, which is, as you know, a problem for a lot of countries in the Mediterranean area, but also in Australia, and in the States, in Canada. And this is a project that tries to monitor forests in order to understand the level of heat in the forest, and prevent the fire, and basically provides alert to the emergency system in place in the area to intervene preventively in order to avoid the fire. A project like that requires a lot of technologies coming together. You see in the slides, I'm talking about convergence of different technologies, that they come together, they work together in order to address an important environmental problem. And again, here is a positive point of view on this relationship. Now I'm going also to celebrate our Finnish friends. I'm talking about smart city, and in smart cities, and debate narrative in smart city, we are moving completely towards the so-called sustainable cities. So it's not anymore about the technology as a center of the city, but it's the digital technologies as an enabler for transforming cities in green environment, in sustainable environment. This is a transition at the moment that is on in Europe, I believe elsewhere in the world. I'm talking about Europe because I'm involved in projects in Europe primarily, and there are some cities that are much more ahead than others. There are programs like the Twin Transition Program, the climate actions, there are many. This is the case of a Finnish city, as I said, is Espoo, and here on the slide, you see on these 4 slides, the 4 objectives of the city. You can see that technology is not there anymore, is on the background, is the things that enable you to achieve these 4 objectives that you can see in the screen. And therefore, in this logic, in this narrative, digital technologies has a very positive role in transforming cities in sustainable and green environment. Has a very positive role to guide a city like Espoo towards 2030 and transform this city in a carbon neutral city. And this is the nice one. But there is also something that is not positive in this relationship. And there are various aspects. I'll touch briefly 2. One is on the energy consumption. Now, this is a slide for, these are some quotes from International Energy Agency, in which you see let's say the dimension of energy consumption of digital technologies, particularly in the second one. When you talk about data centers, we are talking about this 194 terawatt hours of electricity, even if the International Energy Agency is positive about the fact that this energy will somehow, this energy consumption will somehow be reduced and introduce efficiency gains in the energy system because of the use of digital technology. So it is a positive view on the energy consumption if you want, but there are other people who does not believe that. And when you are around tables with technology people and policymakers, for example, sometimes you see this difference. This is a quote for an article that probably some of you knows, but I invited to read, and this article is good because brings together all a number of reports about this issue, and it talks about the effect of artificial intelligence as an incredible source of energy consumption. So the point here is artificial intelligence is great, will help us to do all a number of things, but there is an energy cost, quite a substantial energy cost, as you can see in this slide. There is another point which is how do I say, very, very difficult point of discussions because has a number of implications, including geopolitical implications. Now, all this transformation in green economy, sustainable economy through sustainable objects, green objects, electric cars, and so on that we are putting forward requires certain type of materials. Even your mobile phone that you have in your hands, or these laptops we are working on, require certain materials, certain metals, called rare metals. The problem of these rare metals are that are very difficult to mine. The practice for mining are not always sustainable. They have a huge consumption of water. They produce a lot of acidic sources, and that can have a negative impact on the environment. So
excuse me, Saverio,
yeah.
we needs to be winding up. So how much more have you got?
No, I'll stop quickly. So the problem here is that we want to be green, but to be green we need to use certain metals that are not green. So we are in a sort of loop. On the ethical implication, very quickly, I'll go on. I'll go on to only 2 slides. There is the use of artificial intelligence can bring some bias and that can basically treat groups in a different way. I'm sure you know the Dutch childcare scandal on which the Dutch government fell some time ago, in which basically an algorithm based on machine learning was selecting family based on race rather than on other parameters, and basically targeted a family, non-Dutch family coming from immigrant immigrant background, with a number of implications that are there in the slide. So AI and technology in general has some ethical issues strongly to take into consideration. The second point is, and this is a debate, is with technology, what do? We increase inequality or we decrease inequality? If we look at basic level of technology readiness, so certainly we decrease inequality, but when the technology is sophisticated, and I'm talking about, when we talk about the machine learning and so on, so the next level of sophistication of technologies, we see, or for some, they argue that are still in the hands of a very small portion of people. Those people who have the resources to invest in those technologies. So on one side, we decrease inequality. On the other side, we increase inequality. And I suggest you to go and read the British Academy report on this, which is very good. And on that, I stop. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Saverio. That's excellent. And it was a very nice point to finish on that, talking about inequality, which is the theme of what we're talking about today, along with sustainability and how that does lead to inequalities, those issues. So thank you very much. We're going to, we have one quick question. Andrew, do you want to ask a quick question?
Sorry, Helen, that was a mistake. I'll take that straight down. So.
Okay, well, thank you. I think we need to move on to the next paper now. Our American colleague Brett's not able to join us for a little while. So can we move on to our colleagues from Finland, please? So who's going to give the presentation? Is it okay?
Is that my turn now then?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, you're going to speak, Johanna. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, let me see if I can get this bigger now. Okay, so I will have about 10 minutes and we have a draft paper on perceived sustainability in remote knowledge work with certain advanced information technologies. What we are talking about here are telepresence robots. You can see the picture of those robots. That is actually our own in Vaasa. And then virtual realities and holograms. And these are kind of new remote work technologies that enable location-independent knowledge work to a new extent that wasn't maybe possible 10 years ago. And since COVID-19, they have been increasingly applied. How can I? Yeah. And in theory, they provide both opportunities and challenges for sustainability. So it means we could travel less, which is positive. At the same time, of course, they use energy And as we saw, they use certain rare materials, for example, for manufacturing them. And then another point that we have to consider here is the social sustainability that has been related to knowledge work. That is very important. So, for instance, it's usually considered that in order for us to share the tacit kind of knowledge, create trust, and these sort of things that are needed in knowledge work, then this requires face-to-face meetings. So how should we deal with that? So then we come to the practice, and in practice, the ways developers and users perceive sustainability is directing the ways of developing of these technologies, but also the ways they use them as part of the knowledge work. And we do not know that much about this side of the story. And this is where our research is then coming. So we ask here, how do developers and users of these technologies perceive sustainability, how they understand it, and then especially related to the social sustainability side, how are these technologies considered to impact the social sustainability of remote work? Yes, and as we have been going through the literature, current research about this, well, first, how we understand the sustainability, it's very often considered as through its environmental, social, and economic dimensions. And we just kind of tried out here how it could be in a way defined in this context of sustainable knowledge work. But when we start to then dig deeper into the literature, what we found is that current research is mostly done related to virtual realities. These are the most advanced and the widest used technologies of these three. But often when considered in the context of these technologies, then sustainability is kind of in a minor role in this research. And it's very often considered from engineering perspective. So the kind of environmental measuring the carbon and so on. So this becomes important. Sustainability is very generally understood through these three dimensions that we described. But what seems to be lacking is a little bit like the social scientific perspective, and especially how the developers and users are then considering how they interpret these sustainabilities and the possibilities of those with these technologies. This is an interview study. We have done about 10 interviews per technology developer and user globally in Europe, North America, and Australia. And then we have been using reflective thematic analysis to go through the interviews. To answer the first question, we just kind of started the interviews, them describing how they understand sustainability, and then we looked at the dimensions of those, how they express it. And then to answer the second research question, we looked more widely how they talk about the social dimension in the interviews. And then to answer the first question, here are some quotes that what they start to talk about when they start to talk about the sustainability. So the triple bottom line perspective, these three dimensions are acknowledged by them, but they start to explain things environment first. And then they do talk about the social elements, but the least they talk about the economic elements. Then when we look at these dimensions more closely, and we were asking how they consider sustainability in relation to their technology, then we can see that the developers of virtual reality, which is the green ones, they kind of hold more centralized arguments and perspective of what is the connection of sustainability and then their technology, which is quite understandable in my eyes, because they have been kind of marketing and selling and developing these technologies, and it's quite advanced and quite much used. Then if we look at the environmental side more closely, in general, the connection with these technologies is quite centralized, which might mean that their possibilities, how it's developed and where they focus, is quite fixed, and how they use it. When we look at the social sustainability side, which we found interesting was that they have quite a lot of connections and very different kinds. It's quite fragmented, but there might be like open possibilities how to think and enact sustainabilities through the social dimension. And then when we look at the second research question, we found 3 themes that describe the decisive role of social sustainability, how it's created into these technologies, and how it's practiced with them. And one very, very important aspect here is the sustainable knowledge sharing and learning. So this is not only about kind of how much less we can travel, but also the temporal element, which is contained in, if we think about this in conceptual terms, it's contained in the idea. So VR and holograms enable post-career and global knowledge sharing. There were examples how they developed with simulated rare natural materials, so they might not have to use them to design objects, but they can actually virtually design the objects quite far first, and they can learn about human bodies without harming anyone. Sorry. What we found about avatars especially is that they are found inclusive. So as you see here in the quote, that no one can really, you can access the virtual space without showing your body or how you look. That doesn't matter in the situation, but you can actually share your expertise, maybe even better from that perspective, because people are not drawing attention to your image in a way. Holograms were also found very enchanting, and they were found to sustain the connection between the, for example, lecturer and then the students. And telepresence robots were used, for example, in to bring kids who are hospitalized into schools through these robots, which also sustained their social relations there. But there were, especially with this technology, some issues with surveillance. So this technology is not good or it's not bad for sustainability. It is what it is in a way, and then it comes down to how it's used, and also that it constitutes inclusivity but also exclusivity, because then of course not everyone can use or access these kinds of technologies if we think globally. So conclusions. We think we have brought something that we didn't find in earlier research. So this is the social scientific perspective, and especially how the developers and users are seeing sustainability and its possibilities and challenges to these different dimensions of sustainability. And then we can also analyze several technologies at the same time. They do consider all these elements. What maybe is most important here, that the social sustainability is in a key role, because if this doesn't work in knowledge work, if we cannot share and learn knowledge, if we cannot create it, then it doesn't matter how environmentally sustainable these technologies are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's one of the lovely things so far today is we've got real life examples from both our guest speakers that really makes a difference to illustrate the themes, and the social science perspective and the practical perspective, really insightful. So thank you both very much. And I'm very pleased to see that Brett and Matthew are able to join us. So is it a double header, Brett and Matthew?
No, I'll be doing the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'll be in the panel discussion, so we thought of dividing the work between us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, should I share my screen or is someone else sharing the slides?
Brett, you can share the screen if possible. So that's in the upper corner when you see the leaf one, it's next to that one.
Yep, okay, let's see. Try this again.
If you have difficulties, do you want me to share it on your behalf, Brett?
I'm not sure. Oh, it's saying it needs permission to share my screen. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing it, I think that'll
Yes,
make
I'll do
faster.
it, Brett. Give me a second.
Okay. Great, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those of you in Europe. So this is a very early stage paper that Muthu and I have been working on for a few weeks now, pretty intensely. And so we are very much looking forward to any comments and thoughts that you may have about the typology that we will present later on. So just to show you how we will present today, we'll start with the introduction to kind of explain what we see as the problem that we're trying to solve with this research. And then we'll go into a discussion of the theoretical gap that we see. We'll talk a little bit about the diasporans as sustainable innovators, and we'll explain who diasporans are. We'll talk about co-creation for sustainable innovation in this particular context. And then we'll discuss a framework and typology of sustainable co-creation that we think could be effective for introducing sustainable innovations. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we intend to develop the paper, as well as some future papers that we have in mind for being able to explore this topic a little bit more in depth. So our research really kind of focuses on the Sustainable Development Goals and the fact that most countries around the world are not going to meet the 2030 deadline for the Sustainable Development Goals. And as of the 2023 report, not only were most countries not on track, but as you can see, there's about half of the targets that have severe deficiencies and another third where there's been no progress or regress progress. So the report called for 7 years of accelerated, sustained, and transformative action of the countries in order to try to come closer to meeting some of the goals that have been established by the UN. But we know that in many small and lower middle income countries, the private sector is oftentimes underdeveloped, which means that they may not have the capacity to be able to innovate. We also know that many countries may have political instability issues, which could impact their ability to also resolve some of these issues. We know that immigrants have been very important for introducing innovations into the destination countries, which are the countries where they are currently living in, but also for their countries of origin, or what we call the origin countries in our research. And these individuals have been very influential in terms of bringing solutions back to not only their destination countries where they're living, but also the origin countries where they've come from. So we believe that the Sustainable Development Goals really are a unique opportunity for immigrants, the people who have left their origin countries, and the diaspora, meaning the people of a given country who have a shared history, but they are now living in other countries. And we believe that these individuals are especially important for addressing some of the Sustainable Development Goals because they tend to retain an emotional tie to the origin country. They also have been very influential in terms of investing in their origin countries, primarily through remittances, but also through investments in technology companies, as well as in other economic development initiatives. And in fact, there have been a countless number of diasporan organizations that have emerged over time. There have been conferences, many initiatives that have been put in place to try to leverage the skills of these diasporans who have left their home countries and moved to other places to build lives. And yet, of all of these various initiatives and organizations that exist, there have been varying outcomes in terms of the success of these initiatives, with only about 4 countries really having strong diasporas who've been able to really impact the development of their countries. And those countries, of course, are China, India, Israel, and Ireland. And so the research question that we would like to focus on is how can immigrants and the diaspora contribute to sustainable innovations for their origin countries? So when we think about the diasporans as sustainable innovators, we feel that these are individuals who could be very influential for solving many of these problems, primarily because our societal problems are both social as well as technological in nature. Social meaning it affects the people who are involved in society, and technological meaning the technologies that we use in our day-to-day living. And so as these individuals are people who kind of have both an understanding of their home country and the context under which it operates, as well as potentially of new solutions that they've seen in existence in the various countries where they are now living, these folks may have a unique advantage to be able to kind of bring together their understanding of problems and solutions in other countries and apply them in their origin country. And because they tend to operate under multiple cultural contexts, oftentimes they are able to recognize a fit between the resources in the destination country and the problems that exist in their origin country. And oftentimes these folks have moved abroad in order to get education or work experience that was not available in the origin country. And this provides them with a unique set of resource endowments that they would ultimately be able to apply towards addressing the problem. And we also understand that because many diasporans are content living in the destination countries that they are in, many of them are not going to return to the origin country on a permanent basis. They will likely stay where they are. And technological advances make it possible for these folks to engage in co-creation processes from wherever they happen to be living. And so we really feel like co-creation for sustainable innovation is something that could be leveraged in order to bring together the diasporans along with the people in the origin country in order to develop innovative solutions for the origin countries. And by co-creation, we mean the actors of the ecosystem, such as the businesses, universities, government intermediaries, and other members of society who can bring knowledge and resources together in order to create solutions that are of mutual value to not only the actors who are part of the solution, but also the people who are affected by the problem that they're trying to solve. By doing so, these individuals are able to generate potentially business, social, as well as environmental value when they do create the various innovative solutions. And so we view co-creation, as a process, that involves integrating resources, networks, and knowledge to achieve common goals as a mechanism through which immigrants would be able to develop sustainable innovations for their origin countries. And so when we look at the literature, we see that there are various ways that immigrants have been contributing back to their origin country. And we've seen that the ways that they contribute oftentimes varies depending on the motivation that they have for trying to solve the problem. So we see two varying motivations, one being predominantly philanthropic and the other being predominantly economic, where they are doing this because they see a clear business opportunity and they want to make money. Under the predominant philanthropic motivations, obviously they're doing it more for intrinsic reasons. They feel compelled to help, their origin country. Maybe they still have family or friends who live in the origin country, and so they want to be helpful. They want to be useful to impacting change in their origin countries. And then we see that kind of the solutions that get created can vary depending on whether the immigrant is more of an outsider to the problem, meaning that they're not personally being affected, or whether they're an insider to the problem. And because these folks, are people who are still living abroad, they're an insider when they still have immediate family or friends who are being impacted by the problem that they're ultimately trying to solve. And so these different motivations can lead to different types of ventures or solutions being created. So generally, when a person is an outsider and they have more of a philanthropic motivation, we see intermediary-led solutions being created, co-created, such that they are essentially looking for other people to develop the solution, and they are contributing kind of as a third party to the development of those solutions. But when they're an insider, we see immigrants actually leading the creation, the co-creation of the innovative solution. And similarly, when there's a predominantly economic motivation, we see that there's usually an intermediary that's creating the business venture that is being pursued. But when there's an insider and a predominant economic motivation, they're actually creating, co-creating a venture, and the immigrant is the one who's ultimately leading that type of solution. So we see that there are kind of these four different ways that immigrants can become involved in helping to create innovative solutions for their origin countries. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so where we are with the paper is that we would like to continue kind of developing this typology that looks at, the four different ways that immigrants could actually be contributing to the home country, but specifically examining, the types of resources that would be used from both the destination as well as the origin country, and how that could potentially affect whether the solution that gets created is ultimately sustainable in the origin country. We also want to consider the co-creation collaborators who are involved in this and how that may need to look different depending on whether it's intermediary-led or immigrant-led in this process. And then also the nature of the relationship between the origin and destination countries, of course, could affect the flow of resources that potentially could happen between the two. And so that relationship could also play a role in determining whether the ultimate solutions that get created would be sustainable in the origin countries where they are being targeted. So that's pretty much where we are with the paper right now. We are planning to obviously continue developing the paper so that we finish it. But we would also like to do a qualitative comparative analysis, since we do believe that there are a lot of different factors that could potentially lead to sustainable innovative solutions. But it's a question, an empirical question, about which configurations of those characteristics would ultimately matter the most. We would also potentially like to do some case studies looking at either diasporan organizations or maybe countries that have seen some of their diaspora come involved and actually be involved in co-creating solutions for them. And then down the road, we would potentially also like to do some experiments where we're working with co-creation teams who would ultimately be working to develop innovative solutions for the origin countries. So I will stop right there. That's the end of my presentation, and I look forward to any questions that you all may have. Thank you very much.
Terrific, and another brilliant presentation, just very different aspects on the same topic. So thank you. There are a couple of questions in the chat. If we start with Severio, do you want to ask a question for Matthew and Brett, and then we'll go back to Jeremy's question for Johanna?
Yeah, just building on my experience as Italians. We are spread all over the place. During the 80s, there were Italian policies from the Italian government to support, let's say, this sort of thing. I don't think they were very successful, but I was just wondering if, in your view, or in your idea of this research, there is this angle. If this effort, this co-creation effort with diaspora can be driven by government policies, the government of the country of origin, I'm talking. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a very interesting question. From what I have read, and to your earlier comments about it not being effective in Italy, it has varied depending on the country and the relationship of the country with their diaspora. And so, there are some cases where the government, they've created these policies to try to entice the diaspora to come back in. And they've been fairly successful in that, but then sometimes like the government gets intimidated, by the power that the diaspora have, and then, things kind of fall apart. And so there haven't been a lot of countries where they have been able to sustain that, other than like the four that I mentioned previously: Israel, Ireland, and China and India are kind of the exemplars as far as government kind of working with the diaspora in order to change the circumstances in the home countries. So it does vary depending on kind of the strength of the government, the strength of the relationship with the diaspora, and it definitely can fall apart very quickly in many countries, and has for several countries. I'm still doing a lot of the research around that, but I've definitely seen where there have been some countries where it couldn't take off, for various reasons, whether it was the politics, that were in place in that particular country, or if it was, again, due to kind of the deterioration of the relationship between the diaspora and the government.
And just to add something to what Brett said, just in relation to our specific paper, we looked at, when we explained the typology and nature of sustainable co-creation, when the government policies are strong versus when the government policies are weak, when there is an institutional vacuum. So how the intermediaries may play a role there, and what would be the role of the immediate family and friends of the specific immigrant. So I think Brett gave a really comprehensive response in relation to the literature. So with respect to our paper, we mainly look at those positive and negative elements, as well as how this would impact on the nature of sustainable co-creation that they would generate.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Brett. Can we go back to Jeremy's question? Jeremy, would you like to ask your question of Johanna?
Yes, thank you, everybody, for really interesting presentations. So I had two questions. One was, I didn't quite understand the reference to centralized on slide 6 and what you were meaning in that diagram around centralized. And I was also interested, I've never met an enchanting hologram, so I surprised that this was something that was working well, because my limited experience of holograms is that I don't really like them compared to real people. So I was interested in that comment as well.
Yeah, so what I meant by if you remember, there was this image where there was these balls inside the image. Yeah. So how the developers and users were describing these different dimensions of sustainability and what kind of things they brought up means that the developers and users of VR technology specifically, they mentioned the same things kind of quite often, whereas the others were more varied in their answers. This is what I meant with centralized versus not so centralized. Yeah, we have, I haven't experienced a hologram myself in this role, so I don't have my own experience about that, but we have interviewed quite many people who are using holograms in universities, for example, that they might have different locations of those universities in several countries. And then they bring one lecturer to give a lecture in all of those places as a hologram. And what they were describing is that the students are quite enchanted. And we use this word because it might be because the technology is new for them. And at that stage, people are like, wow, what is this? You know, what happened with the ChatGPT is not, we are using it quite general today already. So they thought that this was able to capture the attention of the students quite well, and therefore they could see that they were learning well.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. There's another question for you, Hannah, but it's also a question for Siberia. So Federica, do you want to ask Hannah the question? Maybe you can broaden it out to make it a general question about what governments can do in each of these different contexts.
I haven't really thought about that yet. So maybe others can start if you have good answers for this.
Yeah, the problem because these were very interesting. They are what they are. They depend on how they're used. And I was wondering, is there anything the government can do to encourage their use in the context of sustainability? And yeah, that was my question, which could also apply to Saverio. Yes. So if you have any thoughts on that, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick.
But I mean, the European Union is has an whole entire session of the so-called Resilience Fund or Next Generation EU, which is dedicated to promoting the use of this technology and supporting environmental sustainability mainly, let's say like that. Now, is it working? Is a good question for is a good research question. But for example, I'm working in cities a lot. I mean, with the example of Espoo that I shared, and I can see that local authorities are really keen to embrace those technologies to drive environmental sustainability, but also the economic side of it, the inequality side of it. Sometimes the problem is not understanding which technologies to use, not understanding how to use it from the side of the local authority. And so we go back to something that we discussed in a previous online event, which is about the education to technologies for decision makers, and therefore the education of technologies as an enabler for sustainability for decision makers. So that maybe is a key, in my opinion, government policy that needs to be pursued maybe more than it is done, or is done in some sense, but needs to be done more. It's not the technology itself; it's how to use it. How that.
The social science perspective needs to be brought into this. So thank you. And it's a question from Uni for Brett and Matthew. Would you like to ask that question?
Yes, thank you, Brett. And I'm also about the paper, really interesting work. Yeah, you mentioned it is part of the analysis that you also analyze sustainability of the solutions. So there are various ways of doing that, and it is always a bit tricky, or at least I have found it that in the review processes it's easily picked up. So what's your plan for that? And then I have a comment actually, also, or proposal perhaps. So I don't know how, or now you didn't have that many cases, but if you go well beyond or well over 10 cases, so to systematize the analysis, maybe that's sort of like a configurational analysis, FSQCA could work there. So have you been thinking about that, or do you know already now that it is not that large data set in the study?
Yeah, so thanks for the question and the comment. So let me start with your question about how we will measure sustainability of co-creation innovations. So right now, obviously, we're thinking about the innovative solutions that are addressing a sustainable development goal in some way, and that ultimately are solutions that can be sustained in the origin country with the resources that are available in the origin country. And we haven't quite, tried to put percentages on the resources that are being used, from the origin country relative to the destination country. But, our sense is that the origin country needs to kind of own the majority of resources that are going into that solution in order for it to be sustainable in that country in the long run. So that's, what we're thinking about as far as measuring sustainability of the co-created solutions. As far as the data part, we are exploring options for data sets. As I mentioned, there are a lot of different diasporan organizations. Some have been attempting to do this type of economic development work for a few decades now. The UN, USAID, they all have had conferences and things of that nature around this topic. And I think those all started maybe 10 to 20 years ago. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to find some data in one of these organizations that we would be able to use to then kind of go in and do the coding that would allow us to do the qualitative comparative analysis.
Yeah, just to add little to the excellent response Brett has offered. So in terms of the paper, we are thinking of like two papers, like the one conceptual one. So the conceptual paper, I think, as Brett said, that's how we will define sustainable co-creation. So with these two dimensions. And then in terms of the qualitative paper, thank you very much, Johnny, for the suggestion. I think using FSQA with over 10 cases would be really great idea to think about how these different factors simultaneously influence the sustainability of co-creation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. One of the purposes of this event was to get different international perspectives, and I think we are getting that flavour of different thinking from different parts of the east-west parts of the pond. So that's very helpful. It's also good to hear these different theoretical perspectives on addressing what the problems are and what the solutions might be. So I think this is a very fruitful discussion, and I'm looking forward to reading the transcript and going through. So thank you everybody for this part of the session. Then we're going to move on to the next half an hour that Federica's going to lead on. So are you and Matthew going to start on this?
Yes, so thank you very much, Helen. So the purpose of this session is to really have a conversation between our different units about possible, what we're all doing about these topics of sustainability, sustainable innovation and digitalization, and how can we find ways to collaborate with each other or to find avenues of research that are of mutual interest. So I think in the first part of the session, we saw some papers which sort of went into the details of some of the activities that we are doing. And now I think in this last half an hour, we can maybe broaden the perspective and sort of have a general chat about what other people in the centers are doing and where do we see our organizations going in relation to these themes. So Muthu and I have prepared a short presentation. Maybe we can start off with this one just by breaking the ice, and then we are going to leave the floor to Julie and Thomas if they are here, who have also been invited to share their ideas, if that's okay. So I'm going to share my presentation just to give you an idea of where we are at CIMR. So just 1 second. Two screens here. Okay. So can you see my slide?
Yeah, Federica, you could make, if you could make it to the presentation mode.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so Muthu was going to start. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Federica, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. It's really great to have the opportunity to interact with everyone. So, as Federica said, we will talk about where we are in terms of our collaboration and how we could move forward. The next slide, please, Federica. So, in terms of I look at it as a triad, Birkbeck, Kogod, and Vaasa. So we have been working together in this triad, and then we are really grateful to CIMR and all the other research centers within Kogod and Vaasa. That has given us a platform to do a lot of collaboration. So here we have listed based on what we have been doing in the area of sustainability and digitalization. So the first one, the paper presented by Brett. So I'm not going to talk about it because we had extensive conversation about it. So we will be submitting both the conceptual paper and then possibly we will start an empirical paper as well. We got a little bit of funding from Birkbeck to work on the empirical side. So, and then the second one, Birkbeck and Moderna. So even though it's about the triad, then this is an example. We work within the triad and also work with external parties. But even though Federica is still part of our triad, so Federica and myself, we are working on looking at interdisciplinary co-creation because we know that in the literature, it has been always argued that interdisciplinary co-creation takes time, but even though it's very important. But then during the COVID-19 period, we have seen swift interdisciplinary co-creation. So based on some work that I have done with the OECD, Federica and myself, we are working on a paper by looking at what are the capabilities that has enabled the swift interdisciplinary co-creation. And also some of the work that Federica has already started doing, we are also working on a conceptual paper to look at what are the challenges and open questions in relation to interdisciplinary co-creation. Then going into digitalization element, and especially Birkbeck and Vaasa. I have been working with colleagues from Vaasa to look at what are the dynamic capabilities of innovation intermediaries that would help the digital transformation of small and medium enterprises. So this paper is currently under review and also with Birkbeck and Vaasa. So this paper, as I think Martin could see, there are a lot of fellows of Vaasa working in this paper. So in this one, we look at the digital transformation, how that has influenced public and private sector collaboration for supply chain, humanitarian supply chain. So this paper, I think, is slightly advanced in the review process. Next slide, please, Federica. So based on the, next slide, please, Federica. Okay, so thank you. So based on the existing collaboration within the triad, we have been thinking about we can further enhance the collaboration within the triad, as well as we could enhance collaboration between the triad and external parties. The previous slide, Federica, not this one. Yes, thank you. In relation to these potential future collaborations, and then we have been thinking about one angle, interdisciplinary international co-creation to support twin transition. So that means in relation to the digital and sustainability challenges, we know that it's really important to engage in interdisciplinary domain. And also, since most of these challenges are global, it's very important that we co-create with international partners. However, we could see that there are a lot of paradoxical tensions, because when we bring different disciplines together, also when we bring different countries together, therefore we can look at how we could overcome some of the paradoxical tensions, or how can we generate synergies from those paradoxical tensions. What are the new models that we could use? What are the new capabilities and potential outcomes of such co-creations? I'll now hand over to Federica to talk about other two, as well as to explain to you the special issue that we have been working on. Over to you, Federica.
Thank you. So maybe there's a slight delay in when I change the slides. So yes, the other two are just linked to some of the topics that we are already working on in our research, which relate to these topics and where we could maybe develop further collaboration. One is the use of digital platforms. So how can digital platforms, for example, idea crowdsourcing platforms could be used to promote sustainable innovation? That could be a very interesting area of research. And the other one has to do with innovation intermediaries and the emerging digital technologies. Innovation intermediaries is the topic, a phenomenon which some of us have been studying for a number of years, and we have been recently sort of focusing particularly on their role in sort of supporting companies working in the fields of emerging digital technologies, and that perhaps it would be nice to expand this to look not just at how intermediaries support emerging digital technologies, but how do they support digitalization and sustainability at the same time. We know that there are separate literatures now which look at the role of innovation intermediaries in digital, and one that looks to the role of innovation intermediaries in the sustainability transition. It would be maybe interesting to combine them to see what can we learn about the synergies between them. In relation to what Muthu said earlier, Muthu and I have been thinking of developing a proposal for a special issue, which initially we wanted to present as a finished proposal, but we are not able to do so because we are slightly late in our planning, and so we haven't finalized the proposal and we haven't submitted it to a journal yet. So, but the idea is there. So if and when this proposal materializes, which we hope it will, we hope to submit this proposal to a good quality academic journal, then it would be maybe it would be great if people in our network could apply with and submit papers to this potential special issue. So the idea is to combine co-creation and sustainable innovation as themes, where sustainable innovation are innovations that improve sustainability performance in the ecological, economic, and social domains, which is the definition we've seen before in our earlier presentation. And co-creation is a process by which ecosystem actors integrate their resources, knowledge, and networks to address changes or seize opportunities which are not possible within a single organizational boundary. We know that there is a research gap. There is a research gap in this connection between co-creation and sustainability. So how can we use co-creation processes and practice to generate sustainable innovation? There is also scope to investigate the connection between co-creation, digital transformation, and sustainable innovation. This topic has a lot of potential practical applications because firms still seem to be lacking in their understanding of how to use co-creation for sustainability. So a list of possible topics which could be submitted to the special issue. This list is not exhaustive. I don't really want to read through every single line, but the idea is to look at the role of the different actors involved in co-creation process supporting sustainable innovation, meaning businesses, governments, funders, universities, intermediaries, society. The process of co-creation for sustainable innovation, so what practices and models can be used for this approach, and perhaps what role can digital technologies play in this process, and the impact of co-creation on sustainable innovation. So how can co-creation help to address the challenges of sustainable innovation? So as you can see, the scope of this special issue could be quite broad because, again, there isn't really a lot of literature in this particular area. So the special issue is an opportunity which we hope will materialize soon. We think that there are potential areas for collaboration between our centers in many different ways. So research, as we said earlier, we just mentioned some of the projects we are working on and some of the areas where we think collaboration might happen. Special issues could be another one. So proposing joint special issues or having people contribute to special issues we are proposing. Events, so we are having these events. Maybe we can have other more targeted events on the topic. How can we generate impact? So can we think about events which are not just academic, but to generate an impact by dialogue, through dialogue with external partners. Perhaps there are also other ways in which we can collaborate, for example, by applying for grants or by organizing summer schools. So these are just some of the ideas that we had. I'm not sure if Helen wants to add anything to this one.
Not at this point, but if we can bring in Uni
Yes,
for his comments, please.
Yes, so I noticed, so please, Uni, feel free to take the floor.
Thank you, Federica. So one question perhaps about special issues. I think those are really interesting area here. So did you, the line wasn't too good. So did you mention what are the journals you are working with in those special issues? I understood that there are more than one actually on the plans. What journals? That was my question.
Pardon me. No, unfortunately, we are not that advanced in the planning of the special issue. We are planning to submit it to one journal, and we've got a few journals in mind, but we haven't really started the process. But we are aiming for a 4 or 3 star ABS for sort of high impact factor. But we haven't really started the proceeding with any of them.
Okay.
Thank you. We've got a comment from Jeremy and then a comment from Severio.
Yes, shall we
Thanks.
let Junie continue and then we take questions after, if that's okay?
I think that would be good. And also I'll also respond in the chat, Helen, since we have got only 15 more minutes, we could let them.
Sorry, should I continue? Yeah,
Please,
okay. Yeah. Thanks. In your presentation, you had this sort of very tangible or practical proposals also for the collaboration. I wasn't thinking so clearly about those, but and I don't have too much to add actually those practical points. But what comes to topics, I was thinking that sort of that what makes in a broad sense to do and indeed we see from the presentations that there's like lots of new good things that come with digitalization. It is an enabler for many things, and at the same time we get some typically unintended outcomes and impacts, and so it is not so straightforward. So actually my background is in engineering and in ICT industry. I spent 15 years there basically to bring products to every pocket, and we were quite successful at some point in that Finnish company. But there it became really clear that basically this sort of like a efficiency or enabling side, or how to use digitalization for efficiency or enable consumption changes, or how industries do the work. That is very natural for companies, and they, if we think global sense, they have unlimited resources to create solutions that push the world to that direction. But then so in engineering, I see that engineers are very solution oriented. Our school is not just business school, but we have engineering, so we're solution provided. So there's some sort of like a competition perhaps with the topics, and it doesn't make sense to compete with companies with things that they anyway do. But what gets interesting and more complex is that then when we talk about like a systemic transitions, and when we bring together like a regulation, markets, technologies, consumers, and changing preferences and so forth, then that's a really like a complex mix, and then like academic research really can bring something valuable into the picture. And basically, and there are some other topics that were Severio, for example, mentioned. I think that what businesses and companies are not so much taking care of, like when it is like helping public organizations. There was this forest fire prevention example. So then certainly like that sort of things are interesting as a cases to research. But typically like a critical. I would like to see collaboration and research regarding sustainability and digitalization and innovation, perhaps in more in the critical side, and that sort of like a negative or challenging effects there. So, for example, now we have lots of energy-related projects, and we are. There's a big discussion about energy justice in energy research, but then when we are making this electricity network smart, actually it is so that the things that are relevant there in the data justice are becoming relevant. So we are bringing together like a data justice aspects and frameworks to the energy justice, and like combining those avenues. And I would be very happy to kind of explore this sort of like a sectoral integrations and their impacts to sustainability. Then maybe linking to some couple of news that I have seen in Sweden and US. So we usually think that it is good to have more innovations, and it is not a zero-sum game, that when we have something new, it's not necessarily away from somebody else. But with digitalization, there's a surprising effect that nowadays with the data centers, basically, we are blocking opportunities in locally or regionally, that when we got a new data center, this new location, actually it is not possible to have other type of like a manufacturing or economic activities there because of the transmission limitations. So this sort of like a digital innovation is restricting what people can do, and it is quite amazing from the regulation point of view that in Nordics especially we have been really good in planning like a public or cities or municipalities, and how we kind of decide that it is fairly equal, and there are opportunities for everybody. But then with what comes to digitalization, actually we aren't not so good there. So that's sort of again quite like a systemic lens where we come above like a companies alone or technologies, but look the holistic view. What else? Yeah, I wanted to mention or promote this, that we have business schools here in the call, and University of Vaasa is of course traditionally business school, but we have this technology school and energy related, electricity related engineering research there. So it is quite natural also look to that side of the we can have a like a multidisciplinary collaboration that brings in that technology competence area from Vaasa unit. But I think that's all from my side and my reflections. We can move to next one.
Thank you very much. Is there a response from panel? Severio, you've put some comments in the chat. Would you like to say something there?
Just think about the twin transition, which is, yes, a nice concept, but the local Green Deal is a tool that is used at the moment for promoting twin transition. The local Green Deal is basically a public-private partnerships that should bring forward initiatives that are sustainable. Now I'm working on those in cities, and I can see that in all cities in Europe, from from up in Scotland down to Sicily, if the government puts the money in it, yes, it is a great concept. But the organization the companies are not really keen to invest into these. I'm not talking about the large companies. I'm talking small, medium enterprises. So a big challenge here is to understand how to drive small, medium enterprises to understand the value of a local Green Deal, if you want, or to understand the value of a sustainable solution. Yes, there are cases, obviously, but they are not so spread. So in terms of research for twin transition, I see this as a big topic to address, because it has a lot of policy implications that at the moment are not caught, are not solved, because the reality, the twin transition is a concept, the reality is another thing in the field. Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
we were having a conversation, me and Mutu. I said, Mutu wants to solve the problem, and I said to her, you will win the Nobel Prize if you solve the problem.
Thank you.
I was wondering, Helen, if there is anyone from, because I think Thomas wasn't able to join, but if there is anyone from Kogod
I can't hear you very well, Federica. Can you
I'm so
say?
sorry. Is there anyone from Kogod who would like to contribute to the discussion? Because I know that Thomas, I don't think Thomas could
they've
join,
sent
right?
an email. They said they thought the time was Eastern time rather than GBT. Yes, so that's why they haven't joined. But I don't think whether anybody's whether
so
Thomas.
I'm not sure if Brett has anything. Brett is here with us, but maybe. Okay. But the topic that there is also comment from Andrew, so maybe we can take first Brett and then Andrew. Yeah, Brett, sorry.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
Did you want to add anything to the conversation? Because I know that Thomas was not able to join, so I don't know if there's anything from your side that you would like to add to this debate about sort of future avenues for collaboration or areas that you're interested in.
Yeah, I haven't had a conversation with Tomas or David to kind of get their perspective on it, but I think that we're certainly open to future collaborations, and I think hopeful that collaborations will continue, because I think everyone understands that this is really an important topic, and it's really important for universities to also take leadership and trying to bring more understanding around sustainability and bringing innovative solutions, particularly that are sustainable to the market. So I do know that we are committed to continuing and doing what we can to ensure that we're able to contribute to knowledge in this area.
That's great, thank you. And Andrew was introducing this topic of ethics. I know we don't have much time, but maybe we spend a couple of minutes on this, because this is also a topic that links to something that Joni was talking about. This is the role of data, ethics, justice. Perhaps you would like to say something, Andrew, to this point?
Thanks, Federica. Yeah, I think I've really enjoyed this discussion and lots of ideas. I just wanted to throw this in as perhaps another potential angle for researchers to look at, and an area which, with rich dialogue, could open up, because I think there seems to be a massive disconnection between, if you like, the work at the public realm on regulation, on trying to formulate some kind of ethical framework around which technologies in general and AI technologies in particular can become sustainable. But it's quite clear that the people who are actually running those technologies, i.e. the 5 to 10 technology companies, have little regard or paid scant attention to the regulatory developments in, say, United Nations or EU. Like, they don't really lie awake worrying about it. Some recent interviews with Mura Marathi, for example, or Sam Altman, are quite clearly quite evasive on this subject. So I think there's a big, it's not a question I'm asking the panel now, but it's a bigger topic around how you reconcile this private and public attitudes. But at the back of that is a massive disproportionate gain in the terms of the digital dividend which is flowing to these technology companies, and that in itself also creates issues of sustainability. Saverio, you mentioned energy being and access to metals being one particular one. So I think, although it seems though we are in an age of technology, I think there are massive risks to the sustainability of that technology if we don't somehow get those things aligned and find a pathway to build a more kind of ethical and sustainable route to this technology being deployed. That was a comment. I don't know. That's not. I'm not expecting an answer on that, but that's just an opinion.
No, but it's a very good. It's very good to highlight this area. I can see that there is potential convergence of interest between a lot of people here. For example, the topic of Joanna's presentation earlier sort of raises question of ethical use of these technologies. Then so does the presentation by Saverio, and Joni mentioned some of these things. So I can really see a lot of convergence. I'm just wondering whether to take this forward, perhaps what we could do at CIMR is to produce a summary of the discussion to circulate to participants, so that we can perhaps take it from there to see if there are some areas that we can start from in order to, see whether we can develop something together in those areas. Would there be an interesting way to go about it?
Well, I think that's a good idea, given that, hello Martin, that David and Thomas weren't able to join us because of the confusion of the time. But so I definitely think it's worthwhile that we do a summary and ask people to contribute with suggestions the way forward. Martin, did you want to come in at this point?
Just in a very supportive way, and to say that's a great suggestion. We are looking into book projects in some other areas, more on that in a future session. So if we sort of bundled activities, it's great to see what has already been happening. If we can take this a little bit further, that'd be really, really great. So yeah, very supportive of that.
I'm thinking of maybe using something that some colleagues in other places are using quite a lot, and it's called the Padlet, which is a place where people can just post their ideas and suggestions. And maybe if we can create one and we just post all of our ideas into this Padlet, it might be a good idea rather than working on a single written document. I look into how to set one up so we can sort of have a kind of notice board where we post suggestions and ideas. That might be another helpful way to talk to each other.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for all your very interesting questions, by the way. I just taking the opportunity because thank everyone who participated in the discussion through the presentations and the conversation and the chat. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, my thanks. Thank you, Federica, for organising that panel, and thank you for Uni, Johanna, Brett, Matthew for speaking, and of course Saverio for being so active throughout. So thank you all very much. It's been very enjoyable, and we will do the write-up. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.